What's up, everybody? The Red Dragon here, and today we are discussing guns and violence. And I really had just a simple question in mind whenever I started researching this, and my question was, do more guns equal more violence? Because I can tell you that more guns are being flooded onto the streets every single day. I can go and leave right now. I can go travel in 3 or 4 different directions, and within 20 minutes I can find a store or a couple of stores that I can go buy a gun at, and I can do a background check. I can go get a gun. I can go get an AR-15 if I want to. Fairly easy as long as I follow the paperwork and get my background check. So I know that more guns are being produced. I know more guns are being sold onto the streets. So I wanted to know if violent crimes are also increasing because of this. Because if you turn on the news, it sure seems that way, doesn't it? Every night on the nightly news, you see shootings and reports of robberies and all this, and everybody seems to be pointing the finger at guns, like guns are to blame. So whenever I set out to do videos like this where I'm looking at research and I'm looking at statistics, some people ask me, where do you get your information, or how do you find it? And so let me kind of just bring you through the thought process. One, if you go do a search on guns, you're going to see, a million different blogs brought up, and you can go read the conservative gun nut blog, or you can go read the liberal no gun pacifist blog if you want to. And if you read stuff like that, and that's where you're going to get your information, I can tell you that it's probably going to be wrong, or it's going to be very tilted in the way that the writer wants you to believe, because they have an agenda. They have their own belief already, and so I'm not looking for that. The same thing goes for lobbying groups. A lot of politicians will quote different research groups and all this, and here's their findings and stuff. But again, whenever you're dealing with money, when you're dealing with lobbying, you're dealing with agendas. These are people who have some reason to promote why it is that their statistics came up the way that they did. So you have to be very careful when you're going out and getting information like this. So whenever we're looking at crime rates, the best place to go is somewhere that is completely independent. And in this case, it would be the FBI, because the FBI, all of the local law enforcement agencies across the country, they report their crime data to the FBI. So the FBI, they're not, controlling policy. All they are is taking that information and placing it out there. So you can actually go to FBI.gov and actually see all the data on all the crimes going back several years. And there is so freaking much information on this site that you can get lost in it, and you can pinpoint several different areas. It's really a good source. And again, it's probably the most accurate source that you can possibly get. It's not going to be perfect, because not all crimes are actually called in, but it's the closest we can get. So the first chart that we're going to take a look at on the site is dealing with crime in the United States, and you can look at violent crime. And this chart goes all the way back to 1992. And you'll notice that the population was much lower than what it is today, but the violent crime rate was pretty high. This is based on per 100,000 people. So every 100,000 people, you had a violent crime rate of 757.7. You had a murder rate of 9.3. And across the board, violent crime was fairly high. But one thing that you'll start noticing is if you go through here and you go year by year, every year that number goes down until you get all the way to 2011, which is the last year that they have fully updated on the website. Check this out. Our population has grown by a lot. Our violent crime rate has dropped almost 50% since 1992. Our murder rate, the same. So, like I said in the beginning, you've got more guns on the market, you've got more people with guns, and yet our violent crime rate is going down. But how can that be? Because every time you turn on the news, there's nothing but shootings and robberies and stuff. Well, that's because the news is telling you what they want to report on. You can also do a search and look at defensive shootings, shootings that happened because the person was in the right and they had the right to shoot that person and kill them. And there are stories every single day, but you're not hearing about those because the news is deciding what they want to report. And even though there's 50% less crime than 1992, if you turn on the news, you'd have no idea that that was even happening. But let's look at another chart, because you say, Dragon, well, that's just violent crime rate just thrown in together. What we want to know about is crime with weapons. We want to know murder rates and how people are being killed, because these assault rifles, they're just out of hand and we got to ban them, right? Well, let's take a look at murder victims from 2007 to 2011. In 2011, you had 12,664 murders. 8,500 of those were with firearms. But take a look at this number right here. 323 murders in 2011 with rifles. And that includes the so-called assault rifles, which, by the way, is just a political buzzword that people have made up that doesn't even really make any sense if you start really looking into it. It's just a word that you can call and tell a normal person on the street that doesn't research anything, and they think, wow, assault weapon, yeah, of course, nobody should have an assault weapon. I mean, that's a totally another topic for another video that I might do if you're interested in it. But 323 murders out of 12,664 were caused by rifles. There were more murders caused by shotguns, more by hammers and clubs, and more by hands and fists. So do we really have an AR-15 problem in this country? And again, these murder rates are dropping overall year by year. So the data is not matching up to what you're hearing. But let me admit this, even though the crime rate is going down year by year, it's still not good enough. I mean, I would like to see no murders, of course. Of course, that's not going to ever be possible. There's always been murders, and people are going to find a way to kill somebody, whether they have a gun or not, if they really want to kill them. But let's take a look at where the murders are actually taking place, because you can actually do that, again, with the data, because you can look and pinpoint exactly the areas. You can do it by state, you can do it by city, you can do it by neighborhoods and see exactly where the crimes are coming from. And the vast majority of gun violent crimes, they're coming from poor, dense neighborhoods and cities with populations of over 100,000 plus people. And that makes sense, because whenever you have areas that are poor, that are uneducated, where the cops are afraid to go in there, where the businesses don't want to go in there, you're going to have more crimes and problems, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And believe me, I know people are going to bring up different countries and different areas, and I don't really like to compare that, because different population sizes, different laws, different ways of thinking, really. So it's hard to compare those side by side. But one thing, like if you want to bring up the UK, they'll say, well, there's a lot less gun violence, there's a lot less gun murders in the UK. But one thing that they forget to mention is that the UK is one of the most violent. In fact, the European Union voted it the most violent in the Union. So even though you get rid of guns, it doesn't mean that you get rid of violence. What you've really got to do is get at the heart of why people are being violent and not look at the tool, because a gun is not going to just, you're not going to walk into your house and find that it's firing off at random at people. A weapon, whether it's a gun or a shovel or a baseball bat, it's a tool, and it's the person controlling that tool that ultimately has the final say-so in how that outcome actually happens. Columbine, remember that? Yeah, that happened while the assault weapons ban was in place. Connecticut, they already have a law on the books that prohibits assault weapons. So, I mean, it's a lot more complicated than what a lot of politicians, what a lot of news media outlets would like to lead you to believe. But honestly, the overall picture about gun violence and just violence in general, it's actually not near as bad as what they would lead you to believe on the nightly news. So I would encourage you to do your research. Just don't believe everything you hear. If you see something on the news, take it with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Be sure you're looking at places that give you credible information. And as always, like I've been trying to say over and over in my videos, ask questions. Ask questions constantly. Just don't believe everything. If somebody says, you know, we shouldn't have an assault rifle, ask them, what do you consider an assault rifle? Now, more than likely, they probably couldn't even tell you. Or they'll say, a machine gun. Well, tell them machine guns have been outlawed since the 1930s. So next, if you look at Feinstein's bill, what's an assault weapon? Well, if you have attachments on your gun, then all of a sudden it becomes an assault weapon. If you have a threaded barrel, or if you put a pistol grip on your weapon, it makes it an assault weapon. Like, it's so ridiculous and so stupid, but it's because people don't bother looking. They don't bother asking the questions. They don't bother looking at the real actual information. The fact is, violence has gone down in this country year over year for the last several years. And the trend doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon, but you are getting more news reports from the media that focus on violence because that's sensationalism, and they get people to tune into that, and they get people worried and scared, and it's just all propaganda for the most part. So do your own research, ask your questions, and post your comments below. Let me know what you think about this information, and I'll leave links so you can go check out these tables that I showed you from the FBI yourself. That does it for me, The Red Dragon. If you'd like to hear more conversations on this topic, if you want me to talk more about, specifically assault rifles and AR-15s and why you shouldn't have them or have the ability to have them, then I'll definitely take that up if enough people are interested. But post below, let me know, how do you feel about this? And that does it for me, The Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.